That's the reason for it. So, Matej, what do you think?
Well, I'm missing budget levels in this case. Like, this is normal behavior of any kind of game afterward. Like, you see great numbers and then it kind of stabilizes after the golden cohort tapers off.
Mm-hmm.
Then if you see the change of the curve, like there is definitely a problem, and most probably a problem on the UA side of things.
See, he's smart, because that's what we realized. So this is exactly it, Matej. You're absolutely right.
This is a no bullshit gaming show where we talk about games and their revenue in great detail, powered by our ad monetization, game design, and user acquisition triple threat expertise. Welcome to the 2.5 Gamers, the unfiltered truth served with a side of giggles. Let's not forget this is a 4 a.m. conference discussion vibe, so let's not take it too seriously. Tune in now and stay 2.5 steps ahead of the gaming industry.
Don't worry, we are already recording. We can start. Thank you very much for coming. Yeah, and you guys as well. So this is 2.5 Gamers. My name is Matej Lancaric, and I'm the host. But this is the spin-off we started with Michail in Barcelona, the Three Men.
Oh yeah, this is the Three Men podcast. That's true. That's true.
So I'm joined by Michail and Nathan. So Nathan, let's start with you and intro yourself, please. Michail, you don't need to, but if you can afterwards as well, just for everybody to know you a little bit better, that would be great. And then we dive into the topic about like product UA, why reporting sucks and how we can change it and stuff like that. And it's gonna be a lot of fun, I think. I have the no BS here with me drink. So if I smell anything, I will tell.
What's a no BS drink?
Yeah, I'm curious.
Ring. It's no bullshit.
Oh, ring.
Ring.
I thought you had bullshit. No BS drink.
Well, maybe I can. Well, no BS drink is margarita, obviously. Obviously. So Nathan, yeah, okay. Let's start with you.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack in why a margarita would be a no BS drink. But anyway, guys, good to be on the session. I'm Nathan Ceulemans, head of sales at Cohort. Have been on the sidelines of the gaming space for 6-7 years. Previously at Sensor Tower, loved having access to all of the data in the entire gaming space at my fingertips, and now I actually get to do something with it at Cohort. So that's where I'm now.
Nice. Well, Michail, what about yourself?
Michail Katkoff. I've been in games industry for 15 years. Oof. That's why I look so old, but I was young when I started. I've had 2 tracks, so I mainly worked on the product side. So I started as a product manager back in good old Facebook games. Worked at Digital Chocolate, Rovio, Supercell, Zynga, FunPlus. Founded my own company, sold my own company, and moved to my other track that has been going on for 12 years, which is Deconstructor of Fun. It was a hobby. It was just me writing blogs, then podcasting, then newslettering, and now we have like a independent media company.
There you go.
That's how you could put it.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of consulting as well, or the whole Deconstructor Fund does a lot of consulting, and that is the beef of today's, and that's why we're here on Three Men to discuss this consulting part. Because DOF has a lot of executives on the podcast and so forth. So there's I wouldn't say more BS, but a little bit more BS. Here, this is a no BS podcast, so we're going on a no BS rant.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, we started talking about the reporting and how everything is broken. So, what should we do with that? Let's keep that discussion.
Right. I can kick off the kind of like the background, and this is going to be a reaction podcast.
Yeah.
So this is Matej
live reacting
to cohorts and segments and KPIs. The background for this was that I was working with actually a couple of different clients of significant size of companies, above mid and then a very large, and on the front side, like most of these companies had good enough metrics, but they couldn't scale their products. And you played the game, you're like, yeah, it's not the best game I've played, but it's not it's not bad. Like, how come we're not scaling? And we're talking about like very competitive genres. We're talking about puzzle, we're talking about PvP games. So I was looking at the basic KPIs and the ones that the product team was showing, and the basic KPIs, as anywhere in the company, wherever people are working, they would say D1, they would say D7, they would say D30, they would do the retention numbers, 40, 20, 10. They would do a little bit of a ARP DAO, maybe ARPPU here and there. Maybe you could even throw in a CPI, which they do. And you kind of put all these ECPM, a little bit of if there's ad monetization at play. So you kind of like show these numbers, and the way the product team was showing the progress was how we've used to back when I started, like 2010. And that was, showing like, oh, we did an update and now our D7 has improved because we, it went from 18 to 19 and we're like doing better. And maybe sometimes they even show the countries. And I was like, yeah, this is how it's done. But then now that I'm seeing so many products at the same time, I was like, how come this is not scaling? And the first line defense that I had, which really kind of sparked my thinking, was PVX Partners. So they focus on UA financing, and I took one of our clients who was an independent large publisher there, and they did not get the funding. And I'm like, wow, despite these excellent numbers, like a D1 was like 50, D30 could have been better, but it was double digits. And so once they threw in their reasoning of why, I was like, my mind was blown. I was like, yeah. I had no idea how to actually report. And so the focus of this podcast is this this crusade on change and improve reporting. That's how we started working with Cohort. We slapped their data in and started following how these games are improving. So hence we have our Dutch Nathan here. I know you're from Belgium, but
I know you're just pushing my buttons at this point.
But yeah, so that's kind of like the other background.
Yeah, and enter Cohort. I mean, we had this discussion too. Essentially, one of the things that, and I keep coming across the same too, is studios keep looking at their own metrics as if, hey, it's a single point in time. Like, okay, let's cherry pick our best metric from the last month, and let's just go and vaunt that as our metric going forward. Exactly. Exactly. But then, as Mishka was saying, as soon as someone actually takes a closer look, the argument falls apart. And so it's like moving from flatland, where you have this two-dimensional view of everything, and suddenly a three-dimensional object comes crashing down into your landscape, and you realize, no, actually, there's a very different way to look at metrics. So metrics are an evolution over time that can indicate a deterioration, an improvement over time. And sure, when you then start introducing the dimension of time to it, you can definitely have a different picture entirely. But then it even becomes even more complex when you actually start to think about, well, then how does this evolve into a forecasted future? So enter Cohort, right? Is entirely what we do is take a look at historic data and then forecast it out into the future. But that's a whole other story that I could hold you guys on a pitch for forever. So.
But there's the thing: people just take one KPI and say, "Oh, this is great," but that doesn't mean shit. Like, you need to have 2, 3, 4 KPIs just to kind of calculate the whole equation.
So I suggest this because Nathan has prepared some sexy graphs for Matej to react to. So the kind of like my whole crusade of changing the reporting, which you are now joining as knight in honor, is like
where's
really
my
like
armor?
It's in the
it's in the graphs. It's in the graphs.
It's in the graphs. But basically, like there's 5 different graphs, and Nathan, I think you worked these graphs, and we kind of shuffled the data of all the companies. So let's get Matej. Like, we're selling this to Matej, this new reporting structure.
Yeah, why should I care? Why should I care?
Let's get his view. So the first, I think the game that we're looking here is
let me pull them up.
This is like randomized data from a puzzle games company, and
I
they
really
have
like
launched.
the name of the whole graphs. Like Deconstructor 2.5 cohorts. It's amazing. I mean, Nathan,
I played it safe. I was like, I'm not going to offend anyone.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
very cool. Okay.
So we grabbed in, and here, like the little bit of a challenge here is like normally what you would see is that these different cohorts could be also of different color, and because currently you're not seeing which like in the
scroll
tool
down.
yeah, because it's an interactive tool. So
Right
when the 1.0 version was a PDF where you can actually see with different colors different cohorts, and the whole, like, this is the graph number one. This is the most important graph. This is the first graph that I would like to see for product health. And there's a couple of things here. So there's the payback, that hard line, and then there's cohorts, and these cohorts are per month. And so what you're seeing here, especially if they would be colored differently, that's going to be in the next version of a cohort in the update. but what you would be seeing here is the LTV cohorts. And LTV is defined as the aggregate of transactions of each monthly cohort over time, and this is net revenue. So the platform fee has been taken out. And what this type of a graph shows is how many months it takes for a payback per cohort. Now, that's one thing that we've accustomed to looking at. But the most important thing here is, because you could, put the payback as a number, but the most important thing why I think having graph of a cumulative lifetime value over CAC or divided by CAC, so basically ROAS over time by cohort, why this is so important is because you can look at the shape of the curve. And so with the shape of the curve, you can pretty quickly understand how things are evolving. So in this case, what you would see is the first cohorts, the good old golden cohorts, are those that shot in and kind of paid back in about 30 days almost immediately, and look real sexy. And then every cohort after that is doing worse and worse, and look how rapidly worse they're doing. And so that should kind of like put a big question in your mind as like, what the hell is happening? But the second part is the shape of the curve. So the new curves are tapering off really quickly. And when we're looking at these type of graphs, because let's say it's a 4x game, and we know that the customer acquisition cost is incredibly high, and it won't pay back in 1 month, it won't pay back in 2, it won't pay back in 6, it might not pay back in 18. But the shape of the curve would always show that it's moving up. It's moving up. Like, it's not stopping. LTV is going up. And that's the most important thing, because then you can make a projection. In this case, if you do take a cohort and make a projection, you would probably say that, hey, we're going to make additional 5 to 10%, even if we extend the cohort payback time to, 2 years, 3 years, because it has tapered off. And it's not going to increase over time. So that's the reason for it. So, Matej, what do you think?
Well, I'm missing budget levels in this case, obviously, in this, because it really, that would say a lot. And it's like, this is normal behavior of any kind of game afterward. Like, you see great numbers and then it kind of stabilizes after the golden cohort tapers off. Then if you see the change of the curve, like there is definitely a problem, and most probably a problem on the UA side of things.
See, he's smart, because that's what we realized. So this is exactly it, Matej. You're absolutely right. This is when I was looking at, because I was only looking at on the product side, and this type of graph, when we were seeing it, as you said correctly, it was once you're seeing such a rapid decline and the change of the shape of the curve, the problem most likely lies in the UI front. But when you're working with a team, a product team, what you probably work mostly with the UI teams, right?
Product team as well. It's just but mostly with UI teams,
Yeah, and so on my side, when I work with a product team, what they are basically saying is they're only focusing on what features they can add, how they can optimize, let's say, a level funnel or matchmaking or other parts. And they are not even looking at the UA part. Like, they're not Yeah, I'm not like the biggest companies.
Wait a second.
They might have on yes.
But it's
So
like the
so
thing
in
is,
this case,
it's not a reporting problem. There is like some kind of different problem within the organization, I would say. But reporting is the first thing.
In many of the organizations,
The reporting is like a reflection of the organizational challenge, of the goals being different, the incentives being different, the entire structure being approached differently, right?
Exactly. And in this case, like in the further conversations, like there was one company that we randomized data with. It was quite clear in the beginning, just seeing as we go through 4 other graphs, that the challenge is on the UA side, and especially as we drove in on the Cohort tool. They have an analyst called Stu. Shout out to Stu. And we're kind of like going deeper and deeper and looking at channels and like where that is coming, because it took us a while to realize that it was UA side. But on the product side, all they knew is, well, we have kind of like 2 marketing strategies. One is where we're targeting core audience of puzzle players, and it's quite expensive, but the quality is really good. And the other one is we're showing mini games, just like with any other one, like, you know, like whatever you name it, mini game. And yeah, the quality is a little bit worse, but the traffic is a lot cheaper. And that was all that they knew on the like this is the product side. This is there's nothing to add to this. And meanwhile, they were working super hard, long hours, improving the product. But the challenge was every time they were improving the product and adding elements, you can see this graph. Every cohort was just worse and worse and worse. And so
but this doesn't say almost anything, about the whole like core of the problem.
If we want to drill down, it gets much more interesting also when you start having the context of, for instance, where they were spending, what they were spending on, you know, in which segments where they were turning what sort of users as well. So definitely a lot that we can drill down to in terms of the ROAS. It's just that chart of essentially, because a lot of how, so I've clicked around a lot, but a lot of how a product team looks at their metrics is so radically different from how the UA team looks at the metrics. Is to your point, Matej, if you look at like a ROAS chart, if you look at a per segment, a per network view, you're not going to be spending the flip side of the time looking at cumulative LTV. So it's like always looking at one half of the moon for your entirety of your life, and then not actually subtracting that customer acquisition cost. And that customer acquisition cost is the UA flip side of the coin.
Yeah.
So that's why this is kind of the starting point is, you know, you've got one minus the other.
Yeah. So this is just like the first graph.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I would go ahead, Matej.
No, I'm just thinking about like how product team can make decisions just like
without UA knowledge.
Yeah, exactly.
All the time, almost purely.
Oh, it's
I'm letting, and that's why I kind of
welcome to the gaming industry.
Welcome to the gaming industry where we optimize only the other half of the coin. But basically, like this is like the first graph that I like to see that starts the question asking. Okay, like where's the problem? And that's number one. And the second one is like, okay, maybe the problem is somehow. Well, this already shows that the problem is in UA. But the second problem that I'd like to look at is after discussing to all the smart people. It's not that I came up with this, but the second part is the net revenue retention over time. And this is an interesting part because this is what influences the shape of the previous curve. Is the sort of a retention rate or rate of decay of each cohort. And the way you read this, so I know it's like an inverted graph. So the way you read this is that if the long-term net revenue retention for each cohort was, let's say, 10%, that means that if a cohort generates 100 million net revenue in month 0, then they are expected to generate 10 million in net revenue by month 11. So it looks at the decay of basically the payers in the cohort, and this again is something that as you're building and optimizing your product, you're trying to increase that retention, that net revenue retention over time in order to stack payers on top of payers.
Yeah, and so this one actually is more visible if you combine. So in Cohort, what we did was we combined the retention trends. So you can see that kind of the darker lines are the most recent ones where you definitely see this collapse of retention in pure activity, but then combined with ARPDAO over time to get a sense of how were some of those older cohorts actually still monetizing over time, and how do then some of the newer cohorts compare against that. You can actually see with the darker lines here, there's a significant drop off already in ARPDAO, combined with then keep in mind that retention is getting worse for those newer cohorts. So ultimately your net revenue retention, the combination of both, is rapidly declining for newer cohorts.
Yeah. Also, this kind of reminds me the good old practice of having benchmarks actually for the UA, just so you know, like, hey, the day 1, day 3, day 7 benchmarks, or like the campaigns are not really meeting those benchmarks, so we need to really rethink the UA strategy, which is clearly not really working well in this case.
Yeah, exactly. And this is something that, so we work on this quite a bit with our customers, is setting up for essentially, and this is the same dummy data, and you can actually see here what's happening with this shift in marketing spend that I was showing earlier also in this tab right here, is that you can see that if they were aligning themselves to, for instance, something like a day 90 ROAS target and keeping themselves well disciplined to that target, then they would also have had a corresponding D7 or D14 target to go after. But ultimately, the numbers were just all over the place because their strategy was shifting constantly across different networks, across different types of creative approaches too. So it speaks for itself on the UA side too.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, also UA folks need to have proper dashboards and reporting just to understand like what's going on as well. Like it's
100%.
Yeah. So it needs to go hand in hand. I usually kind of create like different types of dashboards for me and the UA team. Then for obviously the executives and the C-level, because they don't really understand, like they don't need to see like all the campaign data and all of the fun on the UA side, but that definitely simplified stuff. And then like there's another one for product, which is, I mean, like those are like 3 main types of dashboards everybody needs to have in place, period.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, this is, so I keep coming across this. And actually, I was having a conversation with Jakub, obviously, one of the 2.5 gamers. And one of the things that popped up and that I found was really interesting, and this is why I'm clicking through this bit here, is if you want to ask a product team to set kind of a goal on, hey, you're about to launch this update for your game. It's going to include feature X and Y. What exactly will it mean for your monetization? What exactly will it mean for your retention? What sort of figure do you want to put on that relative uplift, right? And he goes and he says, well, if you ask this of a product team, they're going to look at you like you're crazy, because very often these updates have completely wildly unexpected impacts on monetization and retention, and even trade-offs between the two that are very, very difficult to go and anticipate. And part of that entire approach, when you then contrast it against how UA methodically tries to, set a D7, D30 ROAS target in order to go and hit a longer horizon of D365 and a payback by then. And then on the other side, there's an unwillingness to go and actually attach over time goals to go and hit. Then ultimately you're just setting yourself up for failure. So it's something that, for instance, if I were to actually go back to here, so I'm putting a couple of scenarios head to head, and one of them is where I've inputted some milestones for a product team to go and hit. And for instance, that's in this budget one. And if you were to say, I want my activity to reflect a very high set of milestones that I'm going to hit versus a very low set of milestones I'm going to hit, product team, again, doesn't want to set those goals, because then ultimately they'll know what the ROI was of being late, of being early, of overachieving or underachieving. But it's essential. It's essential for understanding what sort of band of UA spend, what sort of band of targeting can I go do if I were to have the risk appetite to spend against future product. So
it's always the discussion like, oh, well, we improve the product, then we can spend, and then we can scale, because then we need to improve the LTV. But then like nobody says, oh, how much? Okay, so if we improve the LTV by 20%, like what does that mean in terms of like scaling? Nobody is able to say that. Like, oh, well, we'll spend more. How much? Well, let me look into the crystal ball.
And then it comes right back to the first, right? Michail, like if you're subtracting your customer acquisition cost from your LTV, but your media mix is also changing, your marketing mix is also changing. How do you then detach the two impacts from one another?
But the thing is, like the media mix is always changing. It's like you don't run like only 1, 2, or 4 channels at the same time, and it's flat. It's never flat. It's always like there's like so many different things that changing in a week. Not talking about the month or a quarter, not even a year. So it's like it's so different all the time.
Yeah, but I have to say, like, I mean, again, multiple different companies, companies that you would all know that have great games.
Of course.
The reporting is, it might be sophisticated on the UA front, but going through with the executives, the reporting is incredibly simplistic.
So then what's the solution? Like, what should we then start reporting, and like what kind of dashboards we should put together?
Well, I think these type of dashboards, definitely. So the 5 dashboards that I personally like to, I asked the data scientist like right away. It's like, can you please do these and explain of what I'm looking for, and then we'll start discussing the numbers, because till then, like we're not really discussing anything meaningful, and it's very hard to dive deep into what can be a problem. So we talked about like the net revenue retention over time, as well as the cumulative LTV versus CAC. I think the third type of a graph that I really like to see is the payer retention over time. So this is the one that is this the one you're showing here?
No, actually, because I actually wanted to echo that point, is even from the data that we received from this old case in mind that we have here, and I have anonymized, we didn't actually get the number that would have mattered to go and set up average revenue per paying user, because they weren't even looking at it that way. So it's literally, it's not even possible for us to go and replicate and show us that graph, because they weren't even looking at it the same way. And it speaks exactly to the case itself.
Yeah. And like the way in the product team, the way we always solved problems was that whenever a number was down, we were first looking inward, like we're looking into the product, understanding what is the challenge. And so the graphs that I'm portraying are a lot with this thinking in mind. Is like, is the problem in product? And if the answer after the first graph is no, then the product is in the marketing, and the problem is in the marketing. And that's when you start going deeper, because you don't want to alarm the UA team and say, hey guys, you're fucking it up. And then they would say, no, the problem is in the product. So first kind of clean up your base, because the product is doing the reporting. So make sure you're not the problem before you bring in UA to solve it.
Well, I think product, then, like all teams, need to have a clear visuals on like what's exactly happening with the game, and I think like there needs to be an education on the side of the product guys, and even on the UA side of things, like obviously that like what people should look at and when and how so they can actually make decisions. Like that's where we need to start. We can't just only shit on people, but actually we need to kind of teach them how to look at things, I guess.
Yeah. And that's kind of the crux of the message, right? Is especially when you start to have on both sides of the coin, you start to have these very variable approaches to metrics. They're looking at different goals, they're looking at different incentives, but they also have different approaches to take along the way, that it becomes very important to centralize on those. So for instance, now we have, incentivized networks too, right?
Yeah.
And you'll see that LTV curves might be through the roof initially, and that you have a flat customer acquisition. Exactly. But then at a certain point, they might plateau, and you're thinking, well, this looks very strange compared to all of the other LTV curves that I have for every other network that I'm spending on. Why is that?
Yeah, because there's no one after they get the reward. There's literally no one playing the game anymore. That's
exactly.
The thing.
They move on to the next game, right?
Yeah.
So they're like, yeah, I've hit my 30-day rewards. Let me move on to this next game, or even the next incentivized network. And then boom, you get a fresh install.
Yeah, but yeah, that's
So
the thing.
it's
People are just kind of applying the LTV curves and like the PLTVs across like all the channels in the same way, which obviously it's not the ideal scenario. And even for rewarded networks, like that's absolutely terrible idea. That's like, okay, even for like you can't really compare like Facebook to Google and TikTok and Apple. I mean, like those are different curves, very different curves.
Mhm. I find it funny when people also talk about scaling up in, for instance, search ads, and I'm thinking like, whoa, what are you talking about there? How are you going to present more for a limited level of searches that are going out there?
Yeah,
So
yeah, that was a funny comment. I genuinely laughed. Like, I mean, I only saw like
you sound like you've heard it before.
Yeah, I heard it before. I only made like few games actually spend significant amount of money on search ads, and that's only thanks to the fact that those were old games. So that's only you have only like a limited amount of search volume for the game you have, and if it's a new game, like, but yeah, anyway, so yeah, fun stuff. Okay, but then yeah.
So one of the graphs that I like to look at is the payer retention over time.
Yeah.
This is the type of graph that is kind of helpful with the previous one, because again, here you're kind of looking at the stickiness of the payers as a one key driver in answering where is the problem, and if if it kind of decomposes the revenue chart of the net revenue retention. That's the one side of the coin, and then the other side is like how well the payers are retaining.
What kind of changes or decisions can you make on like the payer retention?
Yeah. So sometimes it kind of like distills the most important audience, and following how that audience is performing, because there are situations where with multiple different channels you might be acquiring same amount of users as you did last month, but there are more non-paying users, and that kind of like drops all of your numbers down. Maybe you're trying new channels, but at the same time, if you're seeing a payer retention as good as previously, then usually that informs you that there's nothing with the product. It's just like the channel strategy is not functioning correctly.
Yeah, that could be or should be. It makes sense, but that should be also like represented in the ROAS graphs as well. Because if you're not getting payers, like that's kind of a problem on the UA side for sure. But okay, I mean, it kind of makes sense. I like to have more graphs usually, as much as possible. Actually.
Yeah. It's like there's like a series of these 5 graphs. Like the fourth graph that I like to see is the peak average revenue per paying user, and basically peak like this type of a
I can't even say. I can't even spell that.
So it's average revenue per paying user retention over time by cohort. Okay. And so what you're trying off to see here is like how basically just we'll maybe put it over here. But basically you're trying to see is like how does your average revenue per user, so basically like whether they're buying big purchases or multiple different purchases, that both affects the same number. But you're seeing is how is that holding up over time. And so ideally you want to have the situation where actually it increases, the people are paying more and more, at least stay stable. And when you're looking at you're looking here at the degradation of these, and then again you see the first cohorts coming in at a relatively high but also declining over time, which is not good in the type of a game that this is like we're talking about how much people are spending, and even spenders are spending less as the time goes on. That's not a good sign, but it's a sign for the game team to focus on, for example, later level spending, adding more competitive features, etc., etc. But nevertheless, an important sign. But here, what you're looking at is like with every new cohort that was coming into the game, the average revenue per paying user was significantly lower than before. So it wasn't just the amount of payer, it wasn't just even the retention of the payers, those were down, but it was also the spending of the payers was down to a third what it was before.
Which can suggest
it's
like a different campaign optimization. Sorry, Nathan. Just can suggest different optimization on the campaign side, which is purchase versus value optimization, for example. That can also suggest.
And it's significant because you really would hope to tap into a pool of remaining whales, really, or remaining at least somewhat spenders towards that are then much more visible as the remaining daily active users in a cohort when that cohort is very old, right? Like you've lost a ton of your users through your retention trends by that point. You would really hope that the most loyal remnants of that cohort by that point are good spenders. But as you can see from this data pool, we can't see that. It's been declining for the entirety of time. And sure, there are spikes towards the very end of it, but that's a spike over like a 20, 30 day amount of time, and then the cohort dies. So basically what you've got is the very last users in there are starting to spend. There's a few of them, but it's not a significant growth of loyalty and spend in those last EAU.
Yeah, saying it's not enough. That's not enough.
Exactly. You haven't done what you needed to do to squeeze pennies out of those players.
I mean, like this is great, but then you need to kind of split this by OS, Apple versus Google, obviously, and then countries as well, and then, like you said, like UA channels as well, and then you have the like kind of almost complete picture about like what's happening and the health of the game you're looking at.
That's the beauty of having it editable on the fly. I could drill down into the segments if I wanted to, but then we're in Looker. It's not as pretty to show off.
That's the thing. Like dashboards they don't really need to be pretty if they're functional. Like that's it. Like people are like, oh my god, we have these terrible dashboards. Like, man, I'm used to see like dashboards or like tables like it's like Windows 98. I don't care if they're like all the data I need. Make a decision. Yeah, that's fine. It's okay.
Well, it's got to be readable. That's the most important thing.
Yes. That's true. Yeah, that's fair. Fair. Right. Cool.
Yeah, and then the last graph that I wanted to show is net revenue by cohort over time. So this is probably the one that people have always seen, and this is the one that I've seen actually at other companies that exist, but the kind of like the previous four don't. And this is really simple. It's like you break down the months, you show what their contribution is per month, and ideally what you will be seeing is stacking of revenue over time. And this is kind of like the combination of everything. It's the combination of revenue retention, it's the combination of payer retention, it's the combination of average revenue per paying user retention. And you put all these together, and if you're seeing a declining revenue profile, then that's a problem.
Yeah, it is. But it's that
100%.
Also can lead to a problem on the product side as well. Just like people are always kind of like, hey, we are spending more, but the revenue is not increasing. Well, like how can it increase if like the day 30, 60 retention is super low? It's like there's basically no stacking happening. That's definitely important.
Matej, have you seen these sort of a doom loops happen? So there was an interesting scenario with one of the companies that I worked with. Is what was happening is that the team and the company was really much looking at the product and very little looking at the marketing. And when they saw the degradation of the cohorts quite significant, actually they didn't see that degradation. All they saw was the KPIs going down because they didn't look at cohorts.
Yeah.
And they were like, shit, we need to optimize this game more. We need to do this, we need to do that. So made a lot of product improvements, a lot of events, everything to drive retention and like correct things, but they were still not getting the type of results. And what was happening is that they were decreasing the marketing budgets while working on the product. And as they did product improvements, the KPIs only went down.
Yeah,
because the marketing was decreased. And so it created a doom loop where no matter what amount of work you do, the product is the KPIs are going to be worse, even though the product is objectively better. You've seen this?
I think you also talked about this with Laura on Tweak like a few months ago. I mean, like it's normal scenario where like people start, oh, we need to spend less. I was like, yeah, how does that gonna work? And help you with like improve the game and then metrics and everything.
What would you do with that situation? Like, what's your advice?
I mean, honestly, if the numbers are going down, yes, I mean, you just need to be real. You can decrease the spend, but you need to have spend levels when you can get like statistically significant numbers. It's just like you can't go from spending, let's say, $1 million a month to just 100,000 a month, which usually happens. And like that's gonna even like put things in very bad shape always. I had situation where we kind of saw a big increase in CPIs and everything in like Q4, and company wanted to just stop spending. I was like, guys, like let's not do this. It's a terrible idea. Let's just maybe slow down a bit. We actually did this exactly what I said, like going from almost $1 million a month to 100K. It took us 7 months to get back to maybe 800,000 a month, and we didn't even reach back the spend levels we had before. I understand the situation where you are not really able to justify the same levels of spend, but you need to keep the lights on for the sakes of UA end product. So decrease, yes, but not more than 50%. It's like that's going to destroy the whole UA game.
And actually, out of curiosity, is there also, have you seen this perhaps also that when you pull back spend, you also get a completely different behavior of new players coming in with completely different LTV curves than previously?
Yep. Yes, that happened. Like, honestly, I mean, I don't want to like blame everything on algorithms or whatever else. It's just like, it's kind of the play these days. As soon as you change the kind of the whole strategy and you pull back spend, like what happens from time to time is just the audience change as well. And suddenly you are not competing for the high engaged audience and the high value players, but you go and compete with, let's say, minnows and dolphins, and then that's not going to help you either. So yeah, that definitely happened to me before.
Yeah, and then you're deluding yourself on the product side, thinking, hey, our LTV is down, but we're spending less on the marketing side, so we should be able to ramp it back up, but our LTV keeps going down. What's going on here? And then you get back to the doom loop scenario.
Yeah, but then like I kind of get it, because like you can't still like justify the same levels of spend either. It's just it's
no, for sure.
So it's a tough decision, but yeah, it again, like I said, like not more than 50%, then, because then you start decreasing until you hit the rock bottom, and then you never recover. You never recover from that.
Yeah. And do you see when the companies decrease their UA spend, is that they also move away from certain channels?
Yeah.
That are deemed suspect, and that, like, when I see that, that's where the biggest hit at the LTV comes.
Exactly.
Because they're like, like, let me just, like, Apple Oven is kind of salty price. Let's go with something else.
Yeah.
And you're like, your whole product is collapsing. Like, why did you take that off? It was really expensive.
Yeah, it's really expensive. But like that's the thing. You need to keep like things in mind, that you need to hit certain amount of events and spend per day just to see significant results. And like, if you decrease the spend also like to minimum, you won't be able to get these data points. And then, you're basically dead.
Mishka, isn't that what also happened with this case we have in mind? They essentially looked at our Apple Oven spend and they completely shifted around, and CPIs went through the roof.
Yeah. Well, the CPIs really kind of went down as they shifted to other channels.
Yes. Yeah.
So they decreased their spending. They took away, as we were going with Stu through analyzing why these things happen. So the first number, like the dashboards that Nathan showed, is more like to ask the right question, and then when you're asking the right question, then you're finding the answer really quickly. Yeah. And that's the whole idea with these dashboards. But in that case, yes, that's what I saw, is like going away from channels that really worked. I also kind of analyzed it a little bit further because I was trying to analyze how come the first cohorts were so amazing. And then I talked to some of the similar companies and looked at Sensor Tower of like what were their competitors, which channels they were using at the same time, and we're actually seeing that during that period when they were getting these amazing cohorts, everybody was kind of getting amazing cohorts through AppLovin, and like, oh, interesting. Like this was a time when things were really peachy, so they were kind of unlucky or lucky, however you want to put it, that they saw some amazing numbers that were very unique for that time, but actually none of their competitors saw them either. At least none of the same size of the competitors. And that's kind of like, Matej, what do you think about this whole situation of like, I think Nebo was talking about this on LinkedIn, where he was kind of like saying that we're living through this sort of a value optimization renaissance, is because like because the market is not growing. The problem now is that if somebody's growing, they're taking it away from the others, and that's how these some of the best channels are kind of getting unattainable for many products.
Yeah, it's like Facebook is not in the great shape for a long period of time, and now you have AppLovin taking over basically in terms of the performance, almost like Google and Facebook, even TikTok together. It's just like some UA channels are really behind. Also, with all the rewarded stuff, like we had Missed Play as a top one, didn't really improve anything because like there's so many competition even on the UA side of things.
Yeah.
So but like you need to change the strategy a little bit. What I'm kind of a little bit worried is some of the companies have one big channel spending like 70% of their budget, and the rest is like 5 other channels, and that's really, really dangerous, which was also like dangerous like a few years ago when it was the 70% was Facebook or Google. Now it's AppLovin. And I don't think like this is a great UA strategy at all. So like that's the main problem that like people are now facing because it's working so well. But what comes next? If it stops working, then half of the industry is fucked.
Yeah. Damn. Well, that's what I got. I've it was really useful to use Cohort. Nathan, how much is Cohort?
We have a pretty standard package for studios, but people can get in touch for us.
Of course, they should.
They should. So the price varies based on demand, but basically.
No, I mean we do it pretty simple. When we were,
if you use the promo code Deconstructor 2.5 cohorts, maybe you will get a discount.
I can actually say yes. Let's just do that.
No, I
think it's interesting because in the forecasting space, there's a lot of teams at the very top end that have an entire data science team cracking this, and for most mid-sized studios out there, just having access to tools that not only, Mishka, to your point, only get you a little closer to completing your crusade to better metrics, but also give you a better sense of understanding where it's going to. It takes a lot of effort to build out a whole team. So yeah, we'll have these talks with studios, but we have a pretty standard rate to per game to charge.
Yeah. Well, I was trying to joke, but I think I've seen some of the pricing. It's not that expensive, but it was really useful. Like I'm just giving a shout out to Cohort because a lot of the clients that I work with use Cohort, and it's been really helpful to get into the details because as I said, like in nearly, I can't even know the company, like in every company that I work with, I want to say nearly, but I would say every.
Yeah, almost every.
The UA and product are disjointed. And even though they're working on the same thing, they're actually not working on it together.
Oh, Mishka, welcome to my world.
I actually have a really good question on that note. How much do you think that gets perpetuated by teams gaslighting the rest of the company?
No, so that's I don't think the teams are gaslighting. I know that they're not gaslighting because I work with the teams and with the executives, and sometimes when I get them to do these graphs, and not get them. I ask these graphs, and they do these graphs. The data scientists do them, and we're having conversations. And let's say I would see that we would all see in the meeting that we're not even sniffing the ROAS. Like CAC is not even there. On the best cohorts, we're nowhere near. And then you would end up like in this type of a conversation. It's like it's a quite drastic, because it's a game in soft launch and you're not even, the shape of the graph is absolutely wrong. The CAC is too high compared to the LTV. Massive problems. Like most likely, not most likely, I would say 99.9% this game can't be launched.
Yeah.
The team gets super defensive, and it's not that they're gaslighting with their previous numbers. They just didn't see this type of graph.
They just
and then
don't
they
know.
come up with like, well, but once we add this feature, once the leagues come in, once this comes in, once that, I'm like, once those things come in, even if you would double your LTV, which I've never seen, you'd still not get ROAS. Like, let's start there. And this is without the team cost.
Exactly.
So this kind of puts the point of like, they're not gaslighting. They've just never seen this. And they are like, when they, for the first time, start seeing it, it creates a little bit of a panic reaction, because you're like, God damn it. Like, we're so far away, like what we need to be doing. But in most of the companies, these type of graphs just create a good conversation and the focus for the team on doing what matters and finding where the issue is. If the issue is more on the UA side, that becomes clear to everybody. So don't forget about UA. They're not just a team that markets your product who you don't need to really talk to.
Usually
on the other hand, if they're
you don't need to talk to them.
Well, in my experience, you actually don't talk to them that much. Like, yes, you do talk to, but you don't really follow their reporting the same way. The CMO follows their reporting, but you don't. And so this kind of like, these type of graphs, in my opinion, just really brought the teams together to solve against the challenge that they're having with the product, the right type of things, and really kind of like put the focus on the things that in every free-to-play game matter the most, which is payer retention, getting payers and getting them to stay. That's the most important metric that there is.
There you go. There you have it. I think on that, on that motion, So guys, thank you very much for listening, and also Nathan, Michail, thanks for joining. Thanks for showing me all the graphs. I'm sold. So it's good. No, it's good to have this discussion.
There's many more graphs where that came from.
I know.
So
I know.
sit here all night.
So you can see it, and it's all good, because then you can ask good questions and the right questions and make good decisions. So thanks, guys, for coming. Join our Slack channel and see you there. Nathan is there. Well, Michail is not, but they have their own channel, which you can join as well.
I'm on too many Slacks.
Too many Slacks.
Just let's make reporting great again. That's it.
That's it.
Or for the first time, make reporting great.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Matej, for hosting.
Thank you.
Thank you.